Welcome back to the Deep Dive. This time we're going to be talking about an interesting paper by Anton Korenik called Economic Policy Challenges for the Age of AI.
Oh, yeah. I read that one recently, too.
Yeah, so we'll be focusing on AGI specifically and the economic challenges that brings.
Yeah, it's a really thought-provoking paper, I think.
It is. So what did you think of his argument that AGI isn't just another technological leap? He's saying it's more like the end of one era and the beginning of another one.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting. He compares it to the shift from the Malthusian era to the industrial age.
Right.
And I think that's a really apt comparison because it's not just about the technology itself. It's about how that technology changes the fundamental factors that drive the economy.
And what does he say those are, those fundamental factors?
Well, in the Malthusian era, the key factor was land.
Okay.
Right. It was all about how much land you had to grow food and support a population. But then with the industrial age, human labor became the dominant factor.
So where does that leave us with AGI then?
Well, according to Korenik, AGI could make capital, and specifically AI compute and advanced robotics, the new driving force.
So we're no longer limited by the availability of human labor. Instead, it's about access to computing power and sophisticated robots.
Exactly. And the paper highlights how the pace of development in these areas is accelerating at an incredible rate.
He talks about that exponential growth in computing power. Yeah, the amount of compute used to train the top AI models has been doubling every 6 months for the past decade.
It's mind-boggling when you think about it. That's way faster than Moore's Law. And it means we could be seeing trillion-dollar training runs by the end of the decade.
It's hard to even fathom what that level of computing power could achieve. It's no wonder that experts like Jeffrey Hinton were predicting that AGI could be just a few years away.
It really underscores the urgency of addressing these economic challenges. We need to start thinking now about how we're going to adapt to a world where AI can perform most tasks.
Which leads to that big question, what happens to human labor in a world where machines can do almost everything?
Right, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Korenik argues that we could see a drastic decline in the value of human labor,
Potentially leading to mass unemployment and stagnant wages.
Yeah, it's a pretty bleak outlook if you think about it. If machines can do everything we can, why would human labor hold any special value in the economic system?
It's a pretty fundamental challenge to our current economic models, which are built around the idea of work and wages.
It is, and that's why I think it's really important that Korenik lays out these 4 distinct economic scenarios for the transition to AGI.
In the paper he co-authored with Dongyan Su called Scenarios for the Transition to AGI.
Yeah, they explore different possibilities for output growth, wages, and income distribution depending on how quickly and extensively AGI is adopted.
Can you walk us through those scenarios?
Sure, so the first scenario is what they call the business as usual scenario.
Okay.
And in this scenario, AGI advances, there are always some tasks that require human involvement.
So basically things continue along a similar trajectory as they have in recent decades, steady economic growth, rising wages, and so on.
Yeah, more or less. But the other scenarios paint a more challenging picture. In those scenarios, AGI arrives faster and can perform a wider range of tasks.
And what happens then?
Well, in those scenarios, wages could actually collapse before the economy eventually reaches a state of very high growth.
So even if the long-term outlook is positive, there's this period of potential economic turmoil as workers are displaced by AI.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to have proactive policies in place to manage this transition and ensure that the benefits of AGI are shared widely.
We can't just assume that technological progress will automatically lead to economic prosperity for everyone.
Definitely not. We need to be deliberate about how we shape this transition.
This brings up another question that's often debated. Will AGI usher in a post-scarcity world?
That's a very interesting question. The idea that we can have a world where we can produce everything we need in abundance is definitely appealing.
A very utopian vision, isn't it?
It is. But Korenik seems to push back on that a bit. He argues that true scarcity, in the economic sense, will likely persist.
He says that even if we can automate the production of most goods and services, we'll still have limited resources like land, energy, and even time.
And the relative prices of goods and services will shift dramatically, but scarcity won't just vanish.
So even with robots building robots and AI designing new AIs, we'll still have to grapple with fundamental economic questions.
Absolutely. And one of the biggest questions is, what roles will be left for human labor in a world dominated by AGI?
Yeah. So what does Korenik say about that?
Well, he identifies a few areas where humans might still have an edge.
Like what?
One is what he called production and diffusion lags. It takes time to actually build and deploy all these AI systems and robots throughout the economy.
Okay. So there could be a temporary window where certain human skills are still in demand.
Precisely. He also talks about the importance of implicit knowledge.
Which is what?
It's the kind of know-how that's difficult to codify or teach to machines. It's often based on intuition, experience, and tacit understanding.
So things that AI might struggle to replicate.
At least for now. But he acknowledges that these are likely to be temporary advantages.
As AI advances, it will get better at acquiring implicit knowledge and performing tasks that currently require human intuition.
Right, so those jobs might not be safe in the long run.
But he does highlight some potentially more enduring roles for humans.
Yes, things like overseeing and aligning AI to make sure it operates according to our values.
And ensuring it doesn't go rogue.
Right, exactly. That's where human judgment and ethical frameworks become critical.
He also talks about the importance of authentic human connection. Even if AI could theoretically provide things like therapy or childcare better than humans, Some people might simply prefer human interaction in those areas.
Right. There's something about the human touch that might be difficult for AI to replicate.
So even in a world dominated by AI, human preferences and values will continue to shape the economic landscape.
I think that's an important point to remember. It's not just about what AI can do. It's also about what we as humans want and value.
It's clear that we're entering a period of profound change, and we need to start thinking critically about how we prepare for this new reality.
Absolutely. We need to be proactive, not reactive.
And one area where this is going to be especially important is education.
Yeah, our current education system is largely built around preparing people for jobs that might not even exist in a decade or two.
Kornick points out that if AI can do most cognitive tasks, many of the skills we currently value and invest heavily in through education could become obsolete.
Right. It's like that idea of a race between education and technology that economists have been talking about for years, but it takes on a whole new meaning in the age of AGI.
So what does this mean for the future of education? Does a college degree even matter in a world where AI can outperform us in almost every field?
That's the big question, isn't it? Kornick suggests that we need to shift away from traditional models of education that prioritize rote learning and memorization.
And what should we focus on instead?
He talks about the need for AI literacy, understanding how to work with AI, and also focusing on skills that tap into fundamentally human-centric aspects.
Like creativity, critical thinking, emotional intelligence, those sorts of things.
Exactly, the kinds of things that are difficult for AI to replicate.
So it's a vision of education that's less about acquiring specific skills for specific jobs and more about developing adaptable mindsets and fostering a lifelong love of learning.
Precisely, because in a world where AI is constantly evolving, the ability to learn, adapt, and collaborate with intelligent machines will be more valuable than any specific skill set.
This shift has massive implications, not just for individual students, but for our entire education system.
Universities in particular could face declining demand for their services as traditional skill acquisition loses its economic value.
It's a huge challenge that requires a fundamental rethinking of the role and structure of higher education in an AI-driven world. And it's just one of many policy challenges that Kornick outlines in his paper. Let's dive into those policy challenges next. Kornick identifies 8 key areas where we need to start thinking differently and developing new approaches.
He does, and they really cover the spectrum from inequality in education to things like macroeconomic changes and even the environmental impact of AI.
What I find really interesting is that they're all interconnected. You can't really address one without considering the others.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Take the issue of inequality, for example.
It's something that comes up again and again in Kornick's work.
Right, and it's not just within countries, but also between them.
Exactly. How do we prevent the AI revolution from further widening the gap between rich and poor nations?
That's the challenge, isn't it? Many developing economies are heavily reliant on labor-intensive industries.
The very industries that are most likely to be impacted by AI-driven automation.
Precisely. And if we don't address this proactively, we risk exacerbating global inequality.
It's not just about aid. It's about creating a global economic framework that allows all countries to participate in and benefit from the AI revolution.
Absolutely. We need to think about things like technology transfer, education and training, and investment in infrastructure.
So that developing countries aren't left behind.
Exactly. And within developed countries, we need to think about our social safety nets.
Right. How do our welfare systems need to evolve to adapt to a potential future where traditional jobs are scarce?
Kornick even brings up the idea of a universal basic income.
It's definitely a radical idea, but it's one that's gaining traction as we grapple with these potential disruptions.
It speaks to the need for a fundamental shift in how we think about work and income in the age of AI.
And another big challenge Kornick highlights is market concentration in the AI sector.
Developing AGI requires massive resources, computing power, data, expertise,
which could give a handful of companies a significant advantage.
And potentially lead to monopolies.
Like we've seen with the tech giants in the digital economy.
Imagine that same dynamic playing out in the AI space. A few companies controlling access to the most powerful technologies.
It's a concerning prospect.
We need to think about proactive antitrust and market regulation.
But traditional approaches might not be enough.
We need to be creative. Data sharing mandates, interoperability standards, even public investment in AI research and development.
To level the playing field and prevent those monopolies.
Absolutely. And this also underscores the need for international cooperation.
If we want a global AI ecosystem that benefits everyone,
we need to work together to establish shared principles and regulations.
It's a big task, but the stakes are high.
Absolutely.
You know, one of the most interesting things Kornick talks about is using AI itself to understand these economic challenges.
Oh, yeah. He mentions using AI for economic analysis.
It's like AI isn't just the subject of economic study. It's also becoming a tool for studying economics.
It's fascinating, isn't it? He talks about using generative AI to enhance his own research productivity.
So AI can help us analyze vast amounts of data.
Identify complex patterns that humans might miss.
And even generate new economic models.
It has the potential to revolutionize the field.
But we need to be mindful of the potential risks and ethical implications.
Of course, AI is a tool, and like any tool, it can be used for good or ill.
We need to ensure that AI is used responsibly in economics, just like in any other field.
We need to be aware of potential biases in the data.
And make sure that AI is used to promote fairness and equity,
Exactly.
Ultimately, human judgment and ethical considerations need to be central to the process.
We can't just blindly follow the algorithms
It's about finding that balance, leveraging the power of AI,
while preserving human agency.
and ensuring that AI serves our values.
Exactly.
Speaking of values, let's talk about the environmental impact of AI.
It's a growing concern.
As AI systems become more complex and computationally intensive,
They require a lot of energy to train and operate,
and that raises concerns about AI's carbon footprint.
and its contribution to climate change.
We need to find ways to develop and deploy AI more sustainably,
Investing in renewable energy sources.
designing more energy-efficient algorithms.
Maybe even exploring carbon capture technologies.
It's a challenge that requires collaboration.
AI researchers, environmental scientists, policymakers.
We need to work together to make AI more sustainable.
Absolutely.
And this brings us to that overarching challenge, global AI governance.
As AI becomes more powerful and widespread,
It raises questions about who controls this technology.
and how we ensure its development aligns with our values.
We need international frameworks for cooperation
To mitigate the risks of AI
and maximize its benefits.
for all of humanity.
We need dialogue, transparency, and collaboration.
To navigate this new terrain.
And that's where I think the role of economists becomes especially important.
Absolutely.
They can help us understand the complex interactions between AI, economic growth, inequality, and sustainability,
They can help us design policies that promote innovation while mitigating risks.
and create a global economic framework that ensures the benefits of AI are shared widely.
It's a challenging but vital role.
And it requires collaboration across disciplines.
Economists, computer scientists, ethicists, policymakers.
We need to bring all of our collective wisdom to bear on this issue.
The future of AI is too important to be left to chance.
Yeah, it really is a fascinating idea.
Yeah.
Using AI to study economics, it's like this recursive loop.
Right. It's like AI is becoming both the subject and the tool of economic analysis.
And one of the things that Kornick emphasizes is that AI can help us create better economic models.
Oh, absolutely. Traditional economic models often rely on these simplifying assumptions.
That don't always reflect the real world.
Right. They can be too abstract, too theoretical.
And AI can help us build models that are more nuanced, more realistic.
Models that take into account things like behavioral biases, network effects, the complexities of human decision-making.
Exactly. The kinds of things that are hard to capture in traditional models.
And that's where AI can really shine. It can help us build models that better reflect the messiness of the real world.
It's like having a more powerful lens to examine the economy.
And that could lead to better insights, better predictions, and ultimately better policies.
But of course, we need to be careful.
Oh, absolutely.
We need to be mindful of potential biases in the data that's used to train these AI models.
If we're not careful, AI could end up reinforcing existing inequalities.
Right. It's not a magic bullet. It's a tool.
And like any tool, it can be used for good or for ill,
It's up to us to use it wisely.
to make sure it's aligned with our values and our goals.
Now, shifting gears a bit, let's talk about another area where AI is raising some really interesting questions, intellectual property.
Ah, yes. This is a tricky one.
Our current intellectual property frameworks are designed for human creators.
Right. Patents, copyrights, trademarks.
But what happens when AI starts generating inventions, writing books, composing music?
It challenges the very notion of authorship.
Does an AI have intellectual property rights?
And if so, who owns those rights? The AI, the developers, the users.
It's a legal and philosophical minefield.
And it has huge economic implications,
Imagine a world where AI is constantly churning out new inventions and creative works.
potentially at a rate that far exceeds human capacity.
Our current IP system might completely break down.
We might need entirely new frameworks for recognizing and rewarding intellectual property in the age of AI,
And we need to make sure those frameworks are fair and equitable.
so that the benefits of AI-generated innovation are shared widely.
It's a complex issue, but one that we need to start thinking about now.
Before AI upends the entire creative landscape.
And this brings us to one of the most profound challenges that Kornick discusses, the potential existential risks of AGI
It's a sobering thought.
as AI systems become more powerful and autonomous.
There's a growing concern that they could pose a threat to humanity.
It's a concern that's been voiced by some of the leading figures in the AI community.
Elon Musk, Stephen Hawking, others.
Kornick doesn't go into the specifics of those risks in his paper,
But he emphasizes the importance of safety and alignment,
making sure that AI is aligned with human values.
and that it doesn't pose an existential threat.
It's a point that can't be overstated. We need to proceed with caution.
We're dealing with a technology that could surpass human intelligence,
We need to make sure we're building AI that serves humanity.
and not the other way around.
Well, this has been an incredibly thought-provoking conversation.
It really has.
We've covered a lot of ground today, from the potential for mass unemployment to the possibility of a post-scarcity world.
And everything in between.
Kornick's paper is a real call to action.
For economists, for policymakers, for all of us.
To engage with these challenges
To think critically about the future we're creating.
and to work together to shape a future where AI benefits all of humanity.
I couldn't agree more.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the economic challenges of the AI age. We'll be back soon with another exploration of a cutting-edge topic. Until then, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep pushing the boundaries of knowledge.